On the weekend, the anti-vaxxers were at it again. They were spreading their philosophy, their beliefs, their QAnon theories Australia-wide, from Brisbane through to Adelaide. And I wanted to just make some comments about what this all means, because there needs to be a stand that some of us need to make about the way that some of these people behave. Now, I do need to say it's not all of these people, it is some of these people. Now, there are a group of people here who are extreme in their approach, in their behaviour in general, particularly in terms of the way they're advocating violence against those that have mandated vaccinations, and particularly politicians, I guess, where politicians have created, in Victoria in particular, a lockdown that's probably the largest in the world, but nevertheless an effort to be able to keep that particular community safe. Now, many of us may agree with vaccinations, and a minority of us don't. I'm always confused as to why people would choose not to have a jab. But I am particularly concerned with the influence and power being exerted by the right wing in terms of how they're approaching this particular issue, and particularly how their influence is impacting those people in the community. Now, I'm a great believer, believe it or not, in free speech, that we all need to be able to have the opportunity to voice our concerns no matter what they are. But there comes a time when those of us who tend to be progressive in nature need to make a stand and give a voice to many of us who are voiceless because we're simply trying to do the right thing, against those who are suggesting that what is happening in terms of the freedoms and so forth, and the vaccination in particular, is not in accordance with our sense of morality and right and what it means for us, particularly as Australians. I'm concerned that many of us are left feeling disempowered because we, to some extent, have done the right thing. Those of us who have gone out and chosen to get vaccinated because basically we believe that that is in the best interest of all of us, of our community, of our children, our elderly people, that our right is to be able to find a way to protect them, and that mandates are important because, you know, if you're going to be a health professional working amongst the most vulnerable people in our community, then we need to ensure that that community that you're working with are safe, that they're protected from the virus, and that potentially we may be able to cut down on the number of deaths of those particular people. It is important to also note that around the world we're finding that the number of infections that are spread by COVID are increasing. Now, we also need to be aware that there's some figures out of Denmark, I think, which demonstrates that 85% of the people that are infected are non-vaccinated. So there's some strong messages about what it means to be vaccinated. Now, being vaccinated doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to contract COVID. But what it does mean is that the virus load has decreased, that the chances of infecting somebody else are less, and the chances of you, yourself, and others, if you're vaccinated, winding up in hospital. But and we need to be aware that it's okay to declare that we believe for some particular reason that our freedom has been usurped by policies which are generally restrictive. Now, we can have an argument and a debate about the appropriateness of all of that, but when one has a look at the legislation put forward in Victoria, it becomes apparent that the reason why this legislation is being placed forward in the first place is that the restrictions and the health advice, and the public health officer is the one who issues the warnings, the mandates, and whatever it is that takes place around COVID. So that particular legislation runs out shortly and needs to be replaced by something else. Now, it is in our best interest to ensure that the person who is issuing these particular mandates and restrictions around COVID is a person who is duly elected, that it can't be some nominated health advisor. It has to be an elected person of Parliament. It has to be someone that we generally, I guess, as a community, agree is the person that should be implementing some of these policies, not someone who is simply a public servant. So to be able to change that is probably a good thing. The fact that in Victoria they're objecting to it greatly because happens to be around Dan Andrews, who has imposed the severest restrictions of any state in a country in the world for that matter. And that the interesting part of all of this for me is that this minority that goes out and, protests and carries on as they do not represent the majority. They can't, because at the moment, Dan Andrews is creaming them in Victoria. He's run away with the popularity vote. He's the most popular premier in Australia. And the reason for that is that people generally appreciate what he's done, that his effort has been to protect the community from COVID. And to the large extent, during most of the time, he's been very successful at that, except now it seems to be expanding and there seems to be lots of virus in their community, we agree. But given that 90% of the population are almost vaccinated, it has meant, though, that there are few people being hospitalised, and as a result of that, there will be few deaths. So we're confronted with an issue which is going to be with us for a long, long time, and that are restrictions that will be imposed upon certain aspects of our community. Those people that are health providers, the police, public servants, businesses are going to have to make decisions about who is vaccinated and who is not vaccinated. And I just keep wondering, what's the problem here? Why is it so difficult to just have a couple of jabs in the arm? What freedom are we giving up by being vaccinated? And I get so tired of hearing people say that the main reason is that this is only a trial vaccine, apparently. And that's just not true. The working towards a vaccine of this nature has been going on for years. It is nothing new. That it became available and they expedited the process, I guess, once COVID became apparent, is true. And that this vaccine, though, has now not been on a trial. It is actually working in most jurisdictions around the world. So what is it that is your complaint? What are you giving up? Why is it that you think that your freedoms are being taken from you because you're being required to be vaccinated? And if you want to go out and you want to enjoy yourself, then getting a couple of jabs is not a big ask, I don't think. If you want to go to the theatre, if you want to go to a cafe, if you want to go out anywhere publicly and celebrate Christmas and New Year with a whole group of people, then getting vaccinated is not a tall order. I know that for myself, having my COVID vaccination authentication certificate or validation certificate available to me on my phone is an easy and simple process, and that everybody should have it on their phone. You just present it when entering a location and then you get to enter. So what is the big deal? Why is this such an effort? And I think that we need to be wary that at this point in time we're confronted with a sense of divergence, a sense where, or a period of time where we may become divided. There'll be the vaccinated and there'll be those who are unvaccinated. And I think that's a time for us to be very wary about how the unvaccinated may choose to respond and how they may see themselves as a second-class citizen who are put upon by governments, by corporations, by workplaces, and by the community in general. And I don't think it's helpful for us to see it as us and them. That we need to work in a way which helps us to understand the reasons why someone may choose to be unvaccinated. There may come a time when there are just so many of us vaccinated that it doesn't matter anymore. But it does if you care about people and if you care about those that are choosing to be unvaccinated and the fact that they may wind up in hospital and that they may die and that they may infect others around them. It doesn't mean that because we're vaccinated we're not going to get COVID. What it does mean is we're less likely to be those people that are hospitalised or those people that die. And we need to protect everybody. So I think that those people that are choosing to be unvaccinated are just selfish. That there needs to be an awakening. So you need to woke, to use a terminology that most people on the right hate. And I think we need to look at the notion that, or the idea that everybody that's at these protests are not extreme right-wingers, that there are people who generally believe that getting vaccinated is curtailing their freedoms. I get all of that. And we need to have that discussion, right? But when you enter into the realms of QAnon theories, and when you have a group of right-wing thugs who are there just to disrupt the system and cause violence and suggest violence towards politicians, health professionals, and anyone who may advocate for vaccinations, then there's something wrong with our society. And we need to make a stand, a strong stand, against those people, because they're the ones that are going to cause harm to those people that are protesting. And in this particular case, there are a lot of people who were pro-vaccination that were also had their own rally. And one day it's going to come to a point where both of these two sides will meet. And when they do, it will be the non-vaccinated, the anti-vaxxers, who will make a choice about the level of violence that they wish to impose upon the other side. And people will be hurt, and maybe people might die. So we need to be really careful, but we need to make a stand. We can't ignore them either. We have to recognise them for who they are. We have to be able to stand up against them. One of the things that I found most disappointing was the fact that Clive Palmer and his offsiders both stood up and were advocating against vaccinations and mandatory vaccinations. And Craig Kelly was the other guy. And I thought it was a joke because I don't think Clive Palmer has any interest in what is in your best interest. Clive Palmer always has ever been interested in what's important for him and the mining industry that he controls. And he doesn't care whether you're vaccinated or not. My guess is that Clive Palmer, an ageing man who's a wee bit overweight, is probably vaccinated himself. As for Craig Kelly, who knows and who cares? The man's a moron. So, and the fact that he swaps sides and the fact that he's this anti-vaxxer, these are people, and Pauline Hanson's one of them. These are people that are endeavouring to attract the extreme right wing of our society, and it's dangerous. It is dangerous, and we need to be aware of what their intentions are, not because they necessarily believe in anything that's presented to them from the right, but they believe that these are people who will be able to help them form some form of coalition that would be able to give them more power and authority in Parliament. And the interesting thing for me is that if they're not, Pauline Hanson does not care about you. Pauline Hanson is a right-wing, racist woman who has this niche in society which gives her the power and authority she needs to have in order for her to feel important about who she is. And I think that we need to be mindful all the time of what these people's motivations are. They are not about you. They're not about caring for our community. They don't suggest or offer things that we should or should not consider. They are just blanket interested in their own self-interest, and that is all that there is. In fact, an example of this, I think, is the fact that Hanson and some of her cronies in the Senate are choosing to vote against supply so that they can influence certain decisions that they believe are in their base's favour. And that is not about acting in people's best interest, whereby if you're going to cut off supply, you're going to affect millions of people around Australia and a lot of people who are on Centrelink payments as well. And so it's a very thoughtless, inconsiderate way of trying to exert your authority so that you can gain some control over Parliament. So they're my thoughts. Now, I would like to think that if you agree or disagree, then have a conversation with me, and also subscribe to my channel, and so that we can have further discussions about topics such as this and others. Take care of yourself, everybody. Look after yourselves and be safe.